We move to policy order number 9, that the city manager is requested to confer with relevant city staff on determining the most appropriate signage and messaging that would best educate cyclists on the importance of following traffic laws, particularly stopping at red lights, for their own safety and the safety of other cyclists and pedestrians. This was filed by Councilor Kelly, Councilor Siddiqui, and Councilor Carlone. Councilor Kelly, you're the lead sponsor, and you pulled the order.
Thank you. I am happy to change this. There's some suggestions that we may want to have different ideas about how to help cyclists understand the importance of stopping at red lights. On the other hand, of course, as a cyclist, sometimes stopping at red lights makes no safety sense, and there are a variety of other concerns as well. I don't know how much power the city has to do things like move forward with an Idaho stop or give cyclists a jump on the green for motor vehicles or what that might be. I do know that if I wait at any major intersection for very long, I'll see a pedestrian barely missed by a cyclist, and I've got a stack of people telling me that they haven't been missed. And as I get older and slower, as a pedestrian, I think I'm going to become one of those people as well. And it can be deadly, and it can certainly be life-changing for the people that are hit. So the goal is to find some way to address the chaos we see at intersections. The goal is not to punitively treat cyclists or to demonize them or do anything else. But right now, what we have is a super chaotic and dangerous situation. Some people are putting, some cities and state parks and other places are putting signs. They're not big signs, they're relatively small signs aimed at cyclists saying, essentially, hey, dummy, stop for the red light. Whether that's the right message or the wrong message or a different type of message, I'm not exactly sure. The status quo is not working, though, so I'd like to focus some attention on figuring out how to move it to a better place. So with that said, I think others might have some comments.
Councilor Siddiqui.
Thank you. Through you, I think over the weekend we received quite a handful of emails, and I think when I'd first was asked to co-sponsor it, I didn't think of the different implications and different scenarios and some of what, the Idaho stop and kind of the reality that, yes, I think, there are cyclists who will run through red lights. There are cars that run through red lights. There's bad behavior that exists. There's a lot of people engage in it. But I do think we should amend this in a way that I think we want it to be something that could be enforceable. It could be something that I haven't thought about the amendment, so I was going to actually think about exercising my charter right so that we could figure out some language and work with a few of the folks to get to some better language that I think I would feel more comfortable with, because I think I've learned more about this particular issue and signage and what is actually safe. So that's what I'd say.
May I speak before you exercise?
Hold on, because I have Councilor Zondervan next. So you intend to charter it. Are you willing to hold off on your charter right to let other folks comment, or do you want to exercise it now?
I'm open. He was a co-sponsor. So
I have Councilor Zondervan and then Councilor Carlone.
Councilor Carlone, if you want to go first.
You're a co-sponsor.
Councilor Carlone.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Zondervan. It's a good move. My comment is that I've heard, and I think Councilor Kelly was hinting at this, I've heard from friends who cycle all the time who've been hit from behind when bikes stop for a red light. And, so it's the mentality of going through every red light. Policemen at public meetings have said, and I don't believe this statistic, that 2/3 of bikers go through red lights. I don't see that many, but I do see enough. I also see cars going through red lights, which drive me up a wall. So the point I'm trying to make is this is an issue, and there are many good cyclists, and they're as much a victim of this as anything else. And, you know, what are the rules? They're not enforced. I don't know if a sign will make a difference. I don't know if some sort of education program. When you take the education program that community development offers, and you get a free bike helmet, by the way, they go through all these things. But that's not required. So it's wild, wild west. Same with people on skateboards. One quick story, at the corner of Cambridge Street, I'm not sure what the name of the street is now, but near the Memorial Hall, 2 consecutive days, I almost hit the same guy on a bike, and he went through a red light, just as the green light turned, and never saw the guy again. Hopefully he didn't get hit on the 3rd day. But this is a serious issue, and again, when someone gets killed, then we'll do more. So I applaud the effort. Maybe the message has to be different, but I think it's right on target. Thank you.
Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a lot of thoughts on this as a active cyclist once again, but I won't share them all here. I will say that it's important to make a distinction between people on a bike who are just barreling through a red light without watching and without consideration of the safety of what they're doing, and people, including myself, who will safely go through a red light when it makes sense for our own safety as well. Because sometimes when the pedestrian light goes on and people are crossing, that's actually the best time to go as a bicyclist as well, even though technically you're running the light. And in New York City now, they're putting up signs saying, if you're on a bike, go with the pedestrians. And so, you know, it's not that we don't have rules, it's that the rules are designed for the cars, and it doesn't always make sense to do the same thing for the bikes. I think in terms of an Idaho stop, you know, we can do a home rule petition. I mean, it may or may not work out, but it's worth asking. I think it makes a lot of sense to do that. So I'm happy to work with the co-sponsors on this order, and I have some ideas for how we could make it better and, you know, focus on education across the board, not just signage, but a real education program. I think making it mandatory is problematic because we don't want to deter people from using a bike. We also have a lot of tourists who come to town and hop on a blue bike, and, you know, there's no easy way to make them go through an education program, but maybe there are ways to have educational videos on blue bike and give people a discount if they watch the video. You know, there are ways to engage people and get the education across, because a lot of this is about education. It's not that people are necessarily always being willfully reckless. A lot of times people just don't understand the special complexities of biking in Cambridge. You know, it is a complicated, dense city, and there's a lot of stuff going on. So I'm happy to work with the co-sponsors and see if we can get to a better place on this. Thank you.
Councilor Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly, through you, Mr. Chair, to my colleague, I certainly believe that education is important. It's easy to educate people that live in your city. I don't know how you educate people that pass through it. But we have to do something different. You know, I work with a lot of senior citizens, and they're reluctant to, you know, they're already reluctant to come out in the wintertime because the streets are not shoveled properly. But now they're getting more reluctant to come out in the summertime or when the weather's nicer, because they feel like it's hard to negotiate bikes. And they don't understand when bikes are on the sidewalk and have a right to be. They just don't get it. And so we certainly have to do a lot better talking to our senior citizens around bicycle behavior and cycling behavior, excuse me. And I do certainly agree with the education. I just don't know how you get to everyone when we know that everyone that's on a bike is not in Cambridge. They're kind of coming through Cambridge, whether it's from Belmont or Watertown or Boston or Somerville. So I think it's certainly a larger conversation, and I would hope in the next term, the council does sort of a multimodal conversation, a multimodal regional conversation around transportation so that we get the largest swath of people as possible when we start talking about how do we have good transportation behavior. And I was cautious. I didn't say cycling behavior. I said transportation behavior because we all have to share the road, whether we're biking, roller skating, a scooter. And I think some people are confused about what scooters should be in the bike lane, which scooters should not be. We have senior citizens that ride down the bike lane in their motorized chairs because the sidewalks, and I know there's a report on the sidewalk, but I'm not going to take that up now. So we're certainly at that place where we have to have a respectful, civilized conversation about how we share the road. And I would also say, and we're coming up on summertime, you know, getting our young people who are always on bikes, or often, more often maybe than older people on bikes, how do we start instilling that education and the proper way to travel, particularly on a bike, early, so they pass, it's something that's already in them, so when they become an adult, they're already using good practices. So I look forward to where we go forward with this, but I really know it's something that we have to pay our sort of concerted attention on and come up with ways of how we're going to make it safe for people to come through and go through Cambridge in a multimodal transportation way. I yield the floor.
So, yes? Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I know I've been waiting to speak. Can I say 2 words? Yeah, so that's okay. That's all right. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that everyone has to, you know, follow rules that keep not only them safe, but keep other people safe. I didn't feel comfortable with the way this policy order was worded because I didn't think it reflected that. And I think we're at a point in, you know, in sort of the evolution of how our streets are used that this concept of following the rules of the road needs adjustment because those rules were developed when, you know, it was kind of cars were the default and everyone else had to get out of the way. And so we developed rules that tried to keep people safe from cars, but now we're sort of realizing that the rules of the road aren't one size fits all. And as a cyclist myself, I often practice the Idaho stop, usually in places not like Central Square, but in places where, you know, I'm waiting at a light next to a car and I realize that when the walk signal goes on for the pedestrians in parallel, and when we talk about when the pedestrians are crossing, we mean when the pedestrians are going parallel, not across us. It makes sense for me to go on that leading pedestrian interval because it gives me a couple second head start. Then I'm more visible in case somebody has spaced out while sitting at the light and doesn't realize I'm sitting there and wants to turn right. So I will do that and not feel badly about it when the walk sign goes on. And I think there are probably opportunities where we can formalize that either with dedicated pedestrian lights or with signage that says, you know, bikes can proceed on walk signals so that it's clear to drivers and other pedestrians that that's going to happen. And I realize that it's going to take a while for everyone on the streets of all ages to get the hang of this. And so we are at a point where a lot of people I do recognize feel confused about what to expect when they're on the streets. One thing I would say to Councillor Simmons' point is that the young people are actually probably learning to bicycle sooner than they get behind the wheel of cars because we've seen a decrease in the number of young people, particularly those that live in cities, getting licenses. They don't do that till they're 16. By that time, if they've gone through the public schools, they've had bicycle education as fifth graders. They've hopefully ridden their bikes. And so they're already learning rules of the road that are appropriate for people on bikes and on foot, because that's what they're doing. So hopefully, as those young people grow up, we will have a better balance on our streets. So I would support charter writing this and adapting it if that's the will of what Councillor Siddiqui and Councillor Kelly would like to do. Thanks.
So real quick before the order when you work on the wording, I mean, the order talks about, says the city manager is requested to confer with relevant city staff. We had great success when we had Cambridge Bike Safety and the city come to the table together. And so I would just, when you reword this, I would just add that you have other stakeholders at the table, if it includes people who are concerned about this or people who, cyclists, that just so we get multiple perspectives as it, not for the wording, but once it passes. So, Councilor Carlo.
I can completely concur with the Vice Mayor, and I guess Councilor Zondervan was alluding to that earlier about bike safety going forward and pedestrians going forward. I don't think that's the problem that I'm talking about. I'm talking about bicyclists almost getting killed and other bikes hitting somebody that stopped for a red light. It's not black and white. It's what are the problems and what are the ways we can make things safer for a bicyclist as well. And if that was the message that you got, that we were attacking all bicyclists, then I'm sorry. That certainly, I don't think was any of our intents, especially the bicyclists across the way who wrote this. The point is we have to do something. And there's no question in my mind that traffic lights have to be converted. That's very expensive. To include a simultaneous bicycle go, straight that is. You don't want them turning right into pedestrians. That's why there's a 3-second delay for pedestrians, so they don't get hit by, it announces a pedestrian is on the way crossing. It can be the same thing for a bicyclist. This is beyond that, and that should be included, but this is the dangerous part of hitting bicyclists on a 90-degree angle. And that's the part that concerns, as I said, I almost did it twice, and I'm a safe driver. This guy couldn't care less. Thank you.
All right. So, it's a lot of conversation for a charter, right? Let's wrap it up.
I will. It's complicated, and certainly no offense taken. I didn't mean to apply that at all. I just want to point out that, and the Vice Mayor alluded to this, that our roads are designed for the cars. And just the other day, I was biking from City Hall to the King's School on Putnam Ave. And I'm on Western Ave on the cycle track, and it's beautiful, and it's like biking paradise, except for all the bikes coming the wrong way because they also want to be in biking paradise. But anyway, then I take a right on Putnam Ave, and it's like biking hell, right? Because there's 2 lanes of traffic and 1 lane of car storage, and there's no space for me on the bike. So I think we have to factor that into it as well, that, and that's where the conversation gets a little tense because, people who are cyclists do feel like they're being singled out a little bit when, really 90% of the road space is occupied by cars and, there's no room for us. So I think this is a worthwhile conversation to have, and I look forward to the next round.
All right, Councilor Siddiqui exercises her charter right. We now move on to policy order number 10.